Okay, well, this is a short video for this evening's Zoom session. I'm going to post this, and this way, if you can't make it in a synchronous fashion or it does not come together in a synchronous fashion, we will cover this particular area, which is business plans. As you can tell, or perhaps not, but I mentioned I would be at a conference on the West Coast, which is where I am, and I don't know if there's ocean noise in the background, but that's kind of the way things are. So let me get started. This is a screen share, and hopefully you're seeing this. And I'll see if we can make it just a little bit. Actually, that's close enough for government work. All right, so let's speak briefly about business plans. And, I mentioned that there are a lot of things that go into certainly small businesses, this idea of entrepreneurship. We talked a little bit about that. We talked a little bit about culture and so forth. And we kind of finished up that discussion. There is obviously much to do, miles to go before we sleep. And the business plan, which has evolved over the years, still is kind of the schematic, if you will, for the business. Comes in particularly handy, obviously, if we're looking for capital, be that through the SBA or whatever it happens to be, whatever our funding source, angel financiers and others. So basically, a business plan, as described, and Lasher publishes an awful lot to do with business planning, etc. But a business plan describes the who, what, where, when, etc. That make the business concept or this great idea that we have basically come to life. Several areas of the business plan, and these are probably the essential areas. Now, again, you can Google this and you'll come up with I don't know, just dozens of different versions of business plans. And they all are slightly different, but there's an underlying theme and an underlying thread to all of them. There's some commonality, if you will. So a content section is part of what we're looking at in terms of the business plan as being the first part. And the content section is going to have just a handy guide for everybody that's got an interest in this business plan, where they're going to look and find it. So, for example, if I'm interested in the background of a particular individual, in other words, what gives them the capacity to do this, I would find that in contents, and that would be my area of interest. If there's something particularly in pro forma financials, then I would do something along those lines. So, in any event, content section. Second part would be an executive summary, an overview of what this thing is going to be, mission and strategy statement, kind of like a mission vision statement, what we want to do, what we want to try to do, and how we're going to go about doing that. And then some market information, because we need to have done, obviously, our research in terms of, who's going to benefit from what it is we bring to the table, why are they coming to us, and so forth. This is where you'd also find some sort of a pricing model, competitive analysis, and so forth. And then we have the operations aspects of the business, the inputs and costs, where we're going to capitalize this, what processes are involved, what equipment and so forth, management and staffing, and what, again, are the key qualifications of the people that basically are putting this thing together. Because think about it, we start a business, and in a sense, we're the business. So if something bad happens to us, what happens to this adventure of ours? Financial projections. Well, oftentimes, and we kind of try to put together a pro forma balance sheet, income statement, statement of cash flows. But oftentimes, if the business is so unique, we don't have the ability to really access any kind of information along those lines. If there is a competitor or two, it's not often likely that we're going to knock on their door and say, "Hey, how much money are you making? What are your costs? Let me see your business information. Key financial statements." That's probably less likely to happen. So what would we do? Typically, we would do what is called proxy. We would proxy our business, find something that is perhaps in the public domain or something where we can readily get some information and use that as a stand-in or proxy for the business. And you know, look, some are going to be better than others, but this is the nature of what we're trying to do with the business plan. And hopefully current financials, if this business is existing, projected financials, the application of funding, and then what is the capital structure. And that's certainly once we start to get a little bit larger, you know, are we bringing in equity partners? Is this something we're going to finance by debt? Are we just getting, you know, a pile of money from mom and dad or a rich uncle or something like this? And then the idea of contingency planning, you know, what exactly is going to happen if things start to fall apart, and when will we know that that's happening, and so forth. So the whole plan is basically the plan document, prepared backup, you know, in detail, our planner's presentation, because the presumption is at some point we're going to have to present this business plan to someone somewhere, be it a bank, a lender, an angel financier. I think I mentioned that. And basically what's in the planner's head, you know, in other words, express to whomever we would present this to what we're going to actually want to try to do here. 3 M's of business include the market, the management, and the money. And those are the key elements. Every plan must be strong in at least these 3 areas. The roadmap, the idea is to follow the plan, much like driving a car or, you know, following some kind of a map. Today, I guess it would be GPS, but if you get lost, you know, we'll know it at some point and hopefully be able to take corrective action. But the point is, when will we know that we're going off track? And that becomes important. The 4 kinds of planning, well, strategic planning, and we'll be talking about SAP ETOP as the model we will use. Operational planning, and this is more the tactical level where we inject SWOT. Now, I know many of us have come through different professors' classes where a phrase is used something like, well, let's strategically look at this. We want to do a SWOT analysis. Well, I have news for you. A SWOT analysis is a tactical level model. It can be used strategically, but most often it's misused. So it's a tactical level model, not a strategic level model. We're going to talk about the elements and the format of SAP ETOP a little bit later this semester, and that's going to really indicate what the strategic environment is, and environment really is key. Then the budgeting, the inflows and outflows that we expect. And this is very much akin to a statement of cash flows. Forecasting, well, this is in terms of sales, in terms of revenue, if you want to look at it that way, etc. What to do or not to do? Well, many arguments about, and excuse me for just a second, many arguments about what to do or not do. And the go, no go decision in a business is really the NPV argument. It is the net. Now, we learned this in corporate finance, either with Dr. Lee or Professor Ettinger. We learned about NPV. And basically, NPV is the initial investment. And we refer to it as, you know, if we look here, we refer to it as minus I, because it is it, you know, the initial investment that we're going to make to either do this business or a particular venture or something like this. Is this thing an inflow or an outflow? Well, clearly it's an outflow, so minus I. So the initial outflow against what? Against the present value, the now value of future potential inflows, cash inflows. Now, present value, we learn that as a construct in finance as well. It is the now value of what something will be worth in the future. And if we need to, we can revisit that in the class. Alternate sources of finance and capitalization, if you will. Well, venture capital is part of it. Very hard to achieve. Angel financing, and that's typically someone that's, you know, I don't want to be crass about it, but got more money than brains. We can finance through debt, which a lot of people do. and that can be expensive. Nothing wrong with using debt if we use it appropriately. Equity, which would be the idea of somebody making an investment in our firm. We can do things like private placements. We can capitalize a business through insurance settlements, inheritance, and so forth. Some of the more common sense things. In terms of credit, the 5 C's of credit that we've heard about forever still apply. So when we're looking, especially to finance debt, we have to be able to assess all of this because that's what our, in quotes, lenders are going to be looking at. So when we look at character, well, what's the likelihood of repayment? And this speaks to the idea of, is somebody just going to stiff us for the money? And is their approach basically a go jump in the lake kind of an approach? Capacity, do they have the ability, assuming for a moment that somebody would want to repay their debt, do they have the ability to do that? Capital, well, the financial condition of the borrower, is our business worth anything? Or is it basically just nothing, just a bunch of words put on paper? Collateral, we know this from mortgaging a house or buying a car. The physical plant and property, as it were, are the collateral, or sort of a safeguard against complete default for the lender. And then conditions, what's the economy look like? We might find that lending in a bad economy, a high inflationary environment, is a hard thing to achieve. So the general economy, the situation in our particular industry, and so forth. Marketing strategy, and we've all had marketing courses, but what is the basis on which we intend to compete? Is it based on price? Is it some kind of a niche market? Is it some unique product or service that only we can deliver? How are we going to get that word out? How is anybody going to know we're around? How do we approach the customer? Is this something we're going to do through bricks and mortar? Or are we using IG? Or, what is our outreach, so to speak, going to be? Is it strictly an online venture? And so forth. Do we have a website? You get the idea. How do we stack up against any competitors? In other words, it's always the decision, why is somebody going to do business with me versus the person down the street? What is our business philosophy? Is it, for example, more important to address customer wants and needs, or are we solely profit driven, or what's in between all of that? And we'll speak to that a little bit during the semester. What is the future of the market? There were some big firms that, went belly up because they did not assess this correctly. Not the least of which was IBM. In my generation, IBM was a real stalwart domestic firm, but they took their eye off the ball and now they're a fraction of what they used to be. What are the threats? And this starts to get into SAP, ETOP, and a little bit of SWAT for that matter. But what kind of threats exist? And again, if we were brick and mortar mall operation, we need to do something differently. Atlantic City is a real great example. One of the hotels, a bunch of years ago, and I say a bunch because I don't know how many, but a bunch of years ago, this hotel down in Atlantic City, Showboat, closed their casinos. They said, well, we're going to kind of become a family hotel. Okay. Hotels are struggling down in Atlantic City. The city itself is not the prettiest place to hang out. The boardwalk's great, but you go a block in any direction with the possibility of going north, but because that's been, regentrified, I guess is a good word. But, again, so what's the future of Atlantic City? So Showboat decided family oriented. Well, what did they do? Initially, nothing. And so if you went to Showboat 5 years ago, it was a decent enough hotel right on the boardwalk, so you can't beat that. But it was kind of empty, kind of dingy. I think probably one of the great things they did during the year, they had the national, or perhaps it was international pot convention, so that had a lot of appeal, and they kind of filled the hotel, and the big, I guess I would call it a ballroom, but the big open space downstairs was filled with, attendees to the conference. Long story short, you go there today, it's phenomenal. The downstairs has completely been rebuilt with games and electric race cars for people to drive in. instead of the gas operated, and so forth. And just a wonderful place to be. It's pet friendly, it's family friendly, it's right on the boardwalk, and right next door, the empty lot that they purchased, they're putting in a completely enclosed water park, for kids, for family, and so forth. That will run because it's enclosed, will run 24/7 year round. So future of the market for Atlantic City is more like this. Fewer and fewer people, because there are so many other choices, are coming down there just to gamble. Okay, what are the threats? Well, we can imagine many threats, and we'll talk about that during the semester. But we also, in our business plan, have to expect some kind of growth rate that we have to translate into financial information, for lenders and other. Fallback position. What if things turn to smoke? Do we have an alternate financing source? What triggers different events in this alternate plan? What are our ideas to be able to implement alternate plans should something develop? This idea of objectivity and contingency thinking is real important, because what do we tend to do? I mean, brokers, for example, Merrill Lynch and so forth, and that was another career many years ago. People would come up and say, why am I paying you? And in a nutshell, you're paying me for objectivity, because I'm not emotionally attached to your business, to your retirement plan, to your bank account. Same thing with a business. This is your baby. You don't want to think the worst of what's going to happen, or perhaps what is happening, and so forth. So this idea, excuse me, this idea of contingency thinking speaks to the issue of objectivity. And what we call sensitivity analysis is often looked at as best case, worst case, and the most likely. And this is the idea of probabilities and so forth, but we have to assess what is likely to happen in our situation, this business venture of ours, this entrepreneurial adventure. Well, again, probabilities, what's most likely to happen, but what's the worst that it could be? Well, what's the best that it could be? So we need to incorporate that kind of sensitivity analysis in terms of probabilities in our business plan. So just to review a few relationships, and these are the last 3 slides, but remember, I can do $100 million in sales. Doesn't mean I'm making anything. Sales, $1,000. Cost of goods, 600. Gross margin, 400 bucks. Sounds good, right? Certainly sounds good when you say it fast. But then our overall expenses, EBIT, earnings before, interest, taxes, and so forth. Interest expense brings us to earnings before taxes. Tax expense, well, eventually we get down to net income after everybody else got their piece, including the government. So keep those in mind. It's not so much what we sell. That can be a very impressive number, excuse me. But it is very much about, in a sense, what we keep at the end of the day. All right, and again, some of the other relationships. Remember, working capital is current assets minus current liabilities. Ending equity, beginning equity plus net income less dividends, which we wouldn't initially certainly be concerned with. Current ratio, current assets, current liabilities. Average collection period in terms of receivables, because at some point it might become wise to factor receivables, and we'll talk about that. But receivables over sales times, the time period. Debt ratio, long-term debt plus current liabilities divided by total assets. Forecasting, all kinds of methods we can use. Delphi method, exponential smoothing, simple moving averages, linear regression. All of those are tools for us. And then lastly, well, we want in our group, meaning our class, to put together a business plan. And we mentioned that as one of the options we might consider, because we said, look, there's a bunch of things we don't particularly want to do. Remember the notes we took in the first couple of classes, we said we were canceling the midterm. We said that our final presentation would be something topical, perhaps, whether we use the old technique of writing a paper, doing PowerPoint, doing a video, or something else that might be a bit more high tech. We said that was going to be, our final deliverable. We canceled the midterm, but we did say that in terms of that final exam, in terms of canceling that final exam, we would likely replace that with a business plan. So the import to that is this, we want to be able to put together or start to put together a business plan, briefly stating the mission or focus of the firm, everything that it says here. I mentioned we can work in small groups. Some people like that. Some people hate it. You want to do it individually, do it individually. You want to do it in a small group, do it in a small group. But this is kind of where we're headed for the business plan. All right, I am going to send something out so that you know to watch this video in lieu of meeting in a synchronous fashion, later today. Enjoy your day. Be well. Study hard, and we'll be back, next week. Email me with any issues or concerns. Let me stop share. And I'm going to try and make you jealous, just give you a little sweep to the ocean out there. And it's probably too bright to see. But right outside that balcony is the Pacific. Okay. All right. Enjoy your day, and we're going to end the video.